Welcome to the Lipedema podcast, hosted by Shell and Tiana. Our aim is to make noise around lipedema and educate as many people as we can about this disease.
Our guest list contains professionals who work in the field and women who live with lipedema. Thank you for joining us.
Megan Pfeffer is an internationally renowned clinical nutritionist and the founder of I Choose Health, a leading nutrition and lifestyle clinic specialising in nutritional counselling and therapy for the management of lipedema and lymphedema. She is an advisory board member with Lipedema Australia, has lipedema herself, and is a breast cancer survivor. Megan believes it's never too late to regain control of your health and loves to dispel nutritional myths to remove the confusion around what constitutes a healthy eating lifestyle, ultimately empowering people to make positive lifestyle choices. With a background in nutritional medicine, Megan's innovative approach to health and wellness has earned her international recognition as a transformative thought leader in the health industry. Welcome back to the Lipedema podcast. We are your host,
Tiana, and tonight we are joined by Megan Pfeffer. Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. I want to drive straight in because we seem to have very short episodes and we've got a lot to talk to you about. So the very first question I have is, how did you come to learn of lipedema?
So I learned of lipedema from a client who came to me who had lipolymphedema, and she was already following a ketogenic lifestyle. So came to me because I specialize in low carb and keto, and she wanted some help with that. So I hadn't heard of the condition before. So of course I researched it, discovered that I actually had lipedema myself. I really connected with the symptoms and thought, oh my goodness, this explains a lot. And yeah, so it was just one of those moments that the connection between client and patient was very good timing.
That's extraordinary that one of your patients sort of prompted you to learn about a condition that you had yourself. So talk to us about your experience with what you know now to be lipedema. Were you searching for answers prior to your knowledge of lipedema?
No, not really. My health was really quite well managed at the time. In my early 40s, I had started putting on weight and had noticed weight gain in my legs for the first time. But when I started following a keto lifestyle, I lost all of that weight and I got down to a very nice weight. In my younger years, I had no real issues with my legs. My backside was always a little bit bigger, but quite shapely, never a real issue. I had lovely legs when I was younger. So I was quite fortunate, that it wasn't something that started in puberty or before, as a lot of women have that. But during my 40s, I did notice that weight gain sort of started. I was studying, I was helping to build a house, I was working, chronic stress levels going on. So that, kind of really initiated that weight gain. So when I finished studying, I really had to get my health back under control. So I lost a lot of weight and was feeling really good. But when I started reading symptoms of easy bruising, sensitive legs. So if my partner would grab me on the thigh, in the car, sometimes they give you a little squeeze on the thigh. That would be, quite painful. And just those types of symptoms that I then really, really associated with what I had experienced. And then, of course, in later years, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I had chemotherapy, then had a bilateral mastectomy, and that really triggered the lipedema then. So I just thought, gosh, I was so lucky to have already discovered in the previous years leading up to that I had lipedema, that I was already following a keto lifestyle, because, without those things, I think my body would have been in such a different place to where it is. So I still gained weight during that time. There was emotional eating in there, and that seems to be a big thing for a lot of women with lipedema, and particularly, times of chronic stress. Even with following a keto lifestyle, that was a really traumatic experience for me. And so, my lipedema was certainly triggered, but it wasn't, I think it was fairly well contained.
Yeah, I guess with all of your knowledge as a clinical nutritionist, you got on the front foot of supporting your body with all of those important nutrients and sort of the low carb keto lifestyle, as we know, works really, really nicely for the lipedema community. And but there is this belief out there in the community that surgery seems to be the only way to remove the diseased fat and to, control somewhat the disease, and that diet and exercise are of little reward. But with your knowledge, tell us a little bit about your approach to your patients with lipedema specifically.
Well, I think when we say that it's non-responsive to diet and exercise, I think that can raise a lot of confusion and make a lot of us feel like, gee, there's really nothing I can do about this. Nutrition and lifestyle can absolutely play a part in lipedema, because one of the basics, or the base of lipedema, is that chronic inflammation. The cells are larger than they should be. There's a chronic inflammatory response going on. This chronic immune response, just meaning that it's ongoing. The body can't resolve what's going on at that cellular level and the tissue level. And so the immune system's trying to do what it can, and it's just kind of ongoing, and it creates problems in and of itself. And so, yeah, I think that's, just because that is the foundation, that chronic inflammation of lipedema, then inflammation can absolutely be altered by our nutrition and lifestyle. And we know that from things like, for example, over exercising. A lot of women with lipedema, are told to eat less and move more, so they're frantically exercising, doing as much as they can, overdoing it. Really, we have, I know of many clients who have been, exactly that, the pain in their legs is so much worse, not connecting that with the fact that they're over exercising. So exercising, can be really great, but we know that sometimes a more gentle type of exercise, sometimes less weight bearing exercise, it can be different, I think, for everyone, and depending on your, on the stage and where you're up to, and the type as well of where you're at. But exercise can certainly be helpful, for many reasons. And also, as far as nutrition is concerned, that can really help to lower inflammation, and food can absolutely drive inflammation, and so can thought patterns, chronic stress. People really underestimate just how vital it is to manage that mind-body connection. There are so many things that you can contribute to those inflammatory responses. So we can absolutely help to manage the condition through lifestyle and nutrition. And I guess what the message is typically saying is that the actual disease lipedema cells cannot necessarily be dieted away. So where we're looking at weight loss, the weight loss will generally be exclusive to lifestyle weight. So as far as the weight loss is concerned, that is about the lifestyle weight. But as far as aiding the actual body in that chronic inflammatory response, and helping to preserve mobility, because chronic inflammation can lead into further fibrosis. So helping to stop that sort of progressive side of things, or at least putting the brakes on and not making it worse. Nutrition can absolutely play a big role in that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that nutrition is so key. And I think we forget, because we spend so much time with that, like wanting that dopamine response from the junk food and the food that gives us that really, those good instantaneous feelings. We absolutely know what we should be eating. We should be eating real food. However, it doesn't quite give us that same response that we crave in stressful times or in times where we're busy, that artificial food gives us. And how do you patients to marry those two together and to find that common ground between enjoying your food and understanding that sometimes you're not going to stick to a plan, but also like really pushing the point of what they should be eating? What's your approach like?
Well, it's a really complex, it is a really complex matter. Yeah, seeking that sort of what we call cheap dopamine, which really is that, the processed and refined foods. It is such a quick fix sometimes, and it does provide self-comfort. A lot of people have learned to deal with their emotions through their food. It's something that we have access to 24/7. It's always there. It can provide comfort at any time. So self-soothing, self-comfort, suppressing emotions, not wanting to talk about things. Eating can be a great way to do that. There's so many ways that we utilize food nowadays, as well as the addictive nature of processed foods. These foods are created by scientists to activate that bliss point of that combination of fats, salts, and sugars that the brain finds so hard, or just loves. It finds it hard to say no to. So there's absolutely those elements that are involved with it all as well. Plus, there's a couple of other things to consider. One of them being our gut microbiome. We are more microbes than we are human cells. It's a big deal, the health of our microbiome, and there are plenty of studies that show the health of our microbiome not only contributes to things like depression and our mental health, but also, influences our food craving. So sometimes the things we're craving is really actually the the health of our microbiome. But there's also, hormonal imbalances. So if your hormones aren't balanced, that's going to drive certain cravings as well. And yeah, so, and I think a lot of the really low calorie, severely calorie restricted diets that are out there these days really work on that, on the proviso that if you restrict calories enough, you're going to lose weight initially. And so people think, great, this is working. But after a while, the hormones will take over, saying, hang on a second, we don't have enough calories and nutrition here to run the body. And it can start upregulating hormones, upregulating hunger, make you crave carbohydrates and quick sources of energy, and the body wants to reset the weight. And at this point, that's when women often feel like they're the failures, that they've lost their willpower, but actually that's really just how the body works. And so these companies get fabulous repeat customers because they think the diet's working because it did initially. So, there's lots of things to take into consideration with what people are eating, and also, what they're able to achieve. So not everyone wants perfect health of the foods that they're eating. Not everyone's striving to just go, okay, well, I will eat 100% whole foods and never eat another processed food again. We know that's not really realistic. There are perhaps some people that can do that, but I think more common than not, we need to take into account social situations, family situations. Some people have teenagers in the house. We know that the house is full of carbs when there's teenagers around. There are so many things to navigate for people, when they're going through times of chronic stress. That can really be driving blood sugars. It can drive insulin resistance. It can make you crave, quick sources of energy because your body needs those blood sugars. It's not prioritizing digestion and fat burning. It doesn't want to lose fat during times of chronic stress. It wants to hold on to things. Your body's feeling threatened. It will drive you to eating easy carbohydrates. Lots of things to take into account.
Oh, there was so much in what you just said there. I'm like, okay, now let's ask this, this, and this. But my journey actually started with my with gut health. Like, I always thought that I was deformed, so my legs were never on the radar for me. But I just thought, that's my deformity, deal with it. But my gut has been, I've spent thousands of dollars seeking out how to fix my gut. So I love reading and hearing that there is that connection between our gut, our microbiome, and how we are responding to this condition, and our health as well. Like, it's just fascinating.
It really is. And it's so affected by women who have done a lot of dieting, or people that have a high processed food way of eating, because that will, create an imbalance in the gut microbiome. People that are taking, medications, people who had stomach surgery, people with lots of stress, people who drink a lot of coffee and alcohol, and there are so many different things that can influence the health of the gut. And over time, and it's often several of those factors that play, it's one of those multifactorial things, as we say, which is a bit like lipedema. There's tons of aspect contributing to that, and the more that goes on, suddenly you can start becoming intolerant to certain foods that you've been able to tolerate before. And that can be really tricky to understand what they are, because food intolerances are really a cumulative thing, meaning that the poison is always in the dose. So much like lactose intolerance, where you can perhaps get away with 100 mils or 150 mils of milk, and any drop over that, suddenly you're off to the bathroom. Food intolerances, really work like that. So, and that'll be different for everyone, of how much you can tolerate of certain things. And so the other thing is, though, when I say that it's cumulative, that can happen over a course of a few days. So some people will think, well, what was the last food that I ate? It must be something from there. But actually, it could be the fact that 3 days ago you had something in that same group, and then the following day you had something else in that same group, and by the third day it took you over your limit, and you have food intolerances. And then there's also things like menopause differences with estrogen, can make you become more histamine intolerant, and histamines is another big issue for women, with lipedema or mast cell activation syndrome. Lots of different things that can be in play.
Sounds like it makes your job very challenging to try and tackle all of those factors for your clients, to find that happy medium, I suppose, where they're flourishing, but they also get to enjoy their life.
Absolutely, that's right. And I think the severity of the symptoms will dictate that. Some people are just so at their wits' end because of the types of symptoms that they're experiencing. When things are starting to really interfere with your lifestyle, some people are isolating themselves at home because they can't get to a bathroom fast enough, or if they're leaving the house, they have to map out where the bathrooms are, because that sense of urgency can be there. And it really is, there are so many different things that people can have intolerances to. It's amazing. And so, it's one of those things where we have to, kind of eliminate certain things until we can find, what are the things that are aggravating, and then we can build things back in. But a lot of people too will kind of try to self-diagnose, or they'll think that it's this, so they eliminate it. Some people are eliminating a whole lot of stuff, like the FODMAP diets, for example, where you're eliminating a whole lot of foods, and then people are just kind of staying on that. But the elimination programs are really to identify, or to remove triggers. And then once you've removed the triggers, you start reintroduction phases. And, there's certain ways to do that, so that you can actually identify one thing at a time, so that you're not restricting your overall food intake, and taking out just, whole food groups, and not sort of supplementing those things in the meantime.
Oh, that's so important for our listeners to hear, because yes, I've had a few friends and family members who have gone on elimination diets thinking that that's the end goal of how they are to eat, like very plain and simple whole foods. But we need a variety of foods as human beings, and our needs change constantly. So it's nice to hear that that's not the end goal, that elimination diet is to, as you said, to find the triggers and then slowly be able to reintroduce foods, so you get a variety. Now, before we go on to some of our other questions, because we're talking about how complex it is to do your job and to find that middle ground for your clients, what's one thing that our listeners can take away from today that they could implement, add to their lifestyle, to their diet, that would make you really happy as a clinical nutritionist?
Well, look, I think, and I always say to people, really the number one golden sort of rule, if you like, as far as, or, the starting point, I think, for anyone, is to eliminate liquid sugars. So I think that can be of tremendous benefit to everyone, not just people with lipedema. But when we're talking about inflammation, sugar is a major driver of inflammation. And we know that for women with lipedema, sugars and spiking insulin, the hormone insulin, which is a fat storage hormone, predominantly, it does other things as well. But that is particularly problematic. And so when we're talking about foods or beverages that really affect and can drive inflammation, but it can also drive, gut dysbiosis, so it can affect the digestive health, it can affect moods, it can affect joint inflammation, it can drive the deterioration of cartilage and tendons. And, sugar has such far-reaching consequences. And when outside of the food matrix, meaning that you're having it in drinks so that it's already kind of processed and broken down and it just can enter the bloodstream super fast, then that's particularly problematic and is going to to drive, as we said, inflammation. So just looking at trying to remove the sugars you're drinking, and that can include things like milk is a classic one where people just don't realize that the lactose in milk is actually a sugar. That's the carbohydrate in milk. And even a small glass, a 250 ml glass of milk contains 3 teaspoons of sugar. And so, it's a substantial amount. It's a significant amount. And if you turn that into a large latte that you're having 2 or 3 times a day, that's a lot of sugar that you're pouring into your bloodstream and driving that inflammatory response, particularly if you're adding sugars to the milk as well, which a lot of people do. And so, but having, soft drinks is a common one that people pretty much know that soft drinks aren't awesome for you, that have sugar added. So switching to perhaps even a diet soft drink, the diet ones aren't a health food, but it's a much better step than, some people need to take a step. So it's not that you just have to cut out those things altogether, but you take that step. So fruit juices is a classic one where some people still think fruit juice is a health food. We grew up being told that orange juice and all of those things were good for you, but they're really now considered added sugars. Even by the World Health Organization now claims fruit juices as added sugars, and they recommend no more than 6 teaspoons of sugar a day. That's a recommendation to the general population. That's not a recommendation for certainly not what I would recommend for women with lipedema. I think that's too high. But again, it depends where people are coming from too. Transitioning is going to be different for everyone. Depends where you're starting from and what types of things you're having at the moment. But those liquid sugars is a really great place to start.
Oh, do you know what? I'm blown away by that milk comment because I wondered why, milk's you can have dairy, but stay away from milk, because following a keto diet, they generally don't have milk. And I was like, but it's dairy. And so you just totally just answered that for me because I just couldn't understand why that wasn't included. So
yeah, and look, I think a splash of milk here and there is okay. I don't think it's not one of these things where you cannot ever have X amount of milk again. But you don't tend to drink cream by the cup, for example. There's not many people that would have a cup of cream, so we already kind of monitor that. Whereas with milk, people are drinking lots of it, so it can be especially problematic.
I like that you touched on that there, that those rigid rules as well. I think that's quite refreshing for our community because we've been from pillar to post told, eat this, do this, move more. And a lot of us do have distorted eating patterns. So to know that we need to be gentle with ourselves, we need to be caring for ourselves, and there's no rigid rules, I think we really need to take that away as make some sustainable changes that drop all the rules and rigidity around life.
Progress, not perfection, I suppose.
That's it.
It is definitely progress, not perfection. Perfectionism in itself is a disordered state. Can be an issue for a lot of women though with lipedema, and we know that things like Neurodivergence, is becoming more, more talked about, and more adult women are being diagnosed with things like ADHD, and, perfectionism and those types of traits can be common, when there's those types of other things going on as well.
All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. And I want to ask you, how can we spread more awareness in the medical community? Like, how?
Well, yeah, well, look, I think we're getting a lot of tools that can help with that. And certainly Lipedema Australia, I'm on the advisory board for Lipedema Australia. And we have a new board now, and the new advisory board. And it is just, both of them are a bunch of amazing, incredible women who have so much experience and ideas, and so have done some great things already. One of them being the Symptoms for Doctors handout or form that you can now print off from the resources section of Lipedema Australia. And we've got a lot of really positive feedback of just how great that's been, not only for the women themselves with identifying symptoms, but also for doctors to sort of see, okay, well, this, it's starting to look like a more legitimate condition, because there's, things that are speaking in their language. So, a lot of the symptoms, we've tried to keep it simple for people to be able to follow themselves, for the patients to be able to follow, but also to have language in there that the doctors identify as well. So it's a great tool for both parties, because, as we know, a lot of women go to their doctors. Their doctors are happy to support them. And yes, there's a lot of doctors that discount that. We know that as well. But there are a lot of doctors who are really happy to support their patients, but they don't have information on it. So it's great to be able to be providing that. Lipedema Australia are coming up with advocacy plans, within, your local parliament members and things like that. So that's going to really help as well. They're also producing a video series, educational series for GPs and other health professionals, which is absolutely fantastic. And the first one of that is being done soon. And then, there's also Dr. Karen Herbst and I have just released a book which is on medical tests for the management, lipedema management. And so even something like that is just such a great tool to be able to take something along and say, look, these are the sorts of things, because, there was such a gap there that women were going to their doctors. Their doctors were saying, well, great, what do we need to test? Just tell me what to do. And, patients were saying, well, I don't know. And the doctor's like, well, I don't know either. And so it's a really great way for people to be able to start educating their doctors as well.
Yeah, they are great tools. And I think when I first heard of it, I was like, oh, you need to see a lipedema doctor. But as I've learned more, I'm like, there is power in taking it to your GP and educating them. And the resources on Lipedema Australia's page are perfect for that. And so, yeah, that's something like I changed my way of thinking around how do we educate? Well, we're the ones who want to know more about it. We take it to our doctors. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're redoing the brochure for health professionals. We're rewriting and updating that at the moment, which is really exciting. We've just done the one, and it'll be released soon, the one for patient brochures as well. And I think the thing is, give your doctor an opportunity with these tools that you can take to them. And if you're still coming up against, disbelief, or, having trouble with, being represented, by your doctor, then it's okay to find someone else for your medical team. I think a lot of people sort of feel stuck in that relationship, thinking that you have to have this loyalty for someone, even if they're not recognizing or helping you with your conditions. But if your health isn't being supported, it's okay to build your healthcare team. And I think that's really important for anyone with lipedema, is that once you find those people who are your people, they're in your court and, doing everything they can for you, it's a game changer. So, having people like your doctor, other specialists, your physiotherapist or your massage therapist, your nutritionist, you've got a really great team behind you, and you're really covering, all areas.
Yeah, it's a good partnership between you all. You all work together. So I want to go back to, you just mentioned a book by that yourself and Dr. Karen Herves have put out. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So it covers medical and nutritional testing for women with lipedema. So it really just, goes through and gives the tools of not only sort of why you would do testing, because, a lot of women don't really understand that it's not just to diagnose bad things, and some people don't want to hear bad medical news, and life's tough enough as it is. I don't want to hear certain things. But it's really important to set baselines, and particularly as we're starting to, as each decade goes on, that, there are things that you want to be monitoring. Blood sugar and insulin is a really important thing to be aware of and where they're at, because insulin resistance can take decades to develop, and people are often being told, for example, that their blood, their blood levels are perfect. They're within range, and they're perfect. But in actual fact, we know that in the background, the body's, the insulin resistance is building. And if they were testing insulin in the background, they would be seeing that there is an issue building. By the time blood sugar levels start rising, insulin resistance has been there for a long time. And once insulin has lost its ability to control your blood sugar levels, it's almost, the horse has already bolted, as they say. So, we like to see these things, catch these things before there's an issue. We don't want to wait till pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. We want to catch that way before that happens, because we don't want the complications that come with that, and the poor health and the vascular damage, and all of those things that compound it. So, different tests to even just vitamin D testing, that a lot of women don't realize. Women with lipedema often have low vitamin D levels, and why that's important, and what sort of things can impact vitamin D levels. And even with other nutritional testing, what things interfere with certain absorption of nutrients, or what medications can make you more likely to have a deficiency in something. What kind of symptoms are you likely to have if you have a deficiency or excess of something? So, it really covers a wide range of things to be able to monitor bone health, even muscle mass, metabolic health, which is just such a big thing for women with lipedema, that we manage metabolic health.
Oh, it sounds like a go-to book for just anything that you want to find out about. So how can our community find your book and you, actually?
Yes, so my you can find me at my website is ichoosehealth.com.au, and you can purchase the book from there. At the moment it's available as an ebook, so you can download that on a number of devices. It will be available down the track in paperback form. So yeah, if you go to the website, you'll be able to find it there.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you. I'll make sure I put all those details in the show notes as well, so that our audience can click on through and and find you. Do you have any tips? I know you said about the reducing liquid sugars. Do you have any tips for patients and how they can access treatment? Because treatment can be very expensive. Do you have any cheat codes, so to speak, on what would be the most expensive thing, less expensive thing for them to do?
It's important to be wearing compression garments, and I think that's something that we all need to be looking at. There are compression garments that you can order online that are off the shelf. So I guess for people who are really on a tight budget, a cheaper way to do that is to be able to go on to some of the online garments, and measure your own body and do that. I think for women with really complex lipedema or progressed lipedema, that you really need to, as part of your healthcare plan, be referred to a physiotherapist, or someone who can specifically be taking your measurements, working out what is the ideal thing for you, the ideal type of garment, and that type of thing. And then I think if addressing nutrition, obviously is a really important thing as well.
Yeah, here. I'm definitely a advocate for compression garments, though it was not my favorite conservative management strategy when I first learned about lipedema. It was the one I was the most resistant to, but it's the one that I'm finding is making the most impact on me, I suppose. But yes, definitely nutrition also makes an incredible impact when we do get it right and when we find that right balance that we can actually enjoy our life and also support our bodies in eating the right things.
That's
So
right. But
good
also, keeping in mind that
tips.
actively participating in daily stress management is something that, can be done that doesn't cost anything necessarily. And so, but you can't underestimate just what a big difference that can make for our health. So getting your sleep right and managing your stress, you can really actively participate in, and that's doing a lot of great stuff as well.
For free. For free.
Yeah.
You can
Yes.
sleep for free, I promise. No, that's excellent tips, Megan. Thank you so much. And look, we're running out of time, but we really appreciate your time here tonight. For all of our listeners, a reminder, ichoosehealth.com.au. You can find Megan and Dr. Herbst's book there. What is the book called, by the way?
It's called A Guide to Medical Tests for Lipedema Management, Patients and Clinicians.
Excellent. So you can find that on Megan's website. But thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.
Take care. Thank you for listening to the Lipedema podcast. Lipedema and its symptoms vary from individual to individual. The opinions and advice voiced on this podcast are of a personal nature and used for educational purposes.
Please take away from this podcast what resonates with you, and please see your GP or preferred specialist for diagnosis and healthcare. We are Shelley and Tiana from the Lipedema podcast. Until our next episode, bye for now.